Hey guys, Troy Casey, Certified Health Nut. In an effort to bring you more fun, freedom, and phenomenon, today we bring Dr. Ingo Mann, and he wrote a book called A Breath of Health, and he's going to talk about holistic health, which is very important. A lot of my clients, I work with them, and one of the first things I make sure that they do is pull the amalgams out of their mouth, the silver fillings that can cause so many problems in the gut microbiome, as well as the mind, and also it creates a conductive charge in the mouth that affects the bacteria. And so I've been working on my holistic dentistry for 25 years. I've invested a lot of money in my mouth. And I found Dr. Mann recently, and he talked about breath, breathing mechanics, how you sleep, etc. So in today's episode, we're going to cover a lot of topics. And as you guys well know, I've been teaching breath work for many years. Breath is the first form of nutrition, breath and then sunlight. And so in this episode, we will be talking about holistic dentistry, optimizing sleep and breathing, as well as referencing the work seen on the Joe Rogan podcast with James Nestor, the author of Breath or Breathe, however you want to pronounce that. And he is a breath researcher. And one of Dr. Mann's mentors, Dr. Ted Balfour, he is quoted in that book dozens of times. And so we will be covering topics like breastfeeding, mastication, digestion, microbiome, breathing mechanics, orthodontics. But as I read in the book, this is more orthopedics, right? The movement of bones as opposed to the movement of teeth. And the nervous system downregulation, amalgam fillings we'll cover a little bit. Facial structure, and stem cells. Very important topic these days, the stem cells and how to activate them. Restoration and relaxation, the anabolic phase, and ultimately rejuvenating our sleep, which is how we regenerate ourselves. So, Dr. Mann, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to get a little bit about your background. I know that you are a hunter. You know how to skin an animal, and nutrition is very important to you. You're German, and you've lived in Minnesota for many years. And so a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I had an interesting journey kind of growing up in Germany and then coming over here at the age of 12. I was the littlest kid and had a funny name and found out there was some stupid farmer who had a dog named Bingo. So that was the middle schoolers had a heyday with that one. But I went to dental school and was trained pretty much conventionally, like every other dentist out there. And I always feel like unlearning is probably way harder than learning new things. So it took a while before I finally started having I think we all have different experiences that kind of make us wake up to an alternative to what's out there. And so when I started going down the path of holistic dentistry, and that was at a time when if you did things outside the norm like that, if you talked about amalgam fillings and taking those out, you had a giant bullseye on your back from the dental boards coming after you. So it was always a minefield of being able, having to tread very carefully when you were that kind of dentist.
Even if you're in school and you question it, you can either get bad grades. I've heard that of other doctors as well. And so did you start opening up your mind during school, or was it after you got out of school?
It was, at that time, I didn't even know to question the things we were learning. I knew I was always the kind of person, I was like the first person to add fiber optic lights to their drills. Every time I saw a better way to do something, I was always like, okay, once I learned about it, I had to do it that way. Like, it would drive me crazy not to do it if I knew there was a better way. So initially, I was just always looking for better ways to do things, and more importantly, looking at the why of things. Because everybody looks at what's going on and how do we slap Band-Aid on it. But if you don't fix the underlying problem, it's just going to come back. And we'll talk about that when we get into orthodontics. Nobody ever looks at the why. That's why when you don't wear your retainer, guess what? All your teeth go back. So it wasn't until I had some different experiences health-wise. Actually, one was with a pet. We had this rescue dog, this little Australian cattle dog, and it was right when I was starting my practice. Barely had enough money to, put ramen noodles on the table. So we went in, and he was acting really lethargic, and we took him into the vet, and they said they sent the blood work off to the University of Wisconsin, and he's got some kind of leukemia, and there were two other dogs with the same diagnosis. I'm like, well, number one, I wasn't really sure about chemo to begin with, and I didn't have $5,000 to, do chemo on this rescue dog. So we took him home, and my ex-wife started researching all this stuff, and she found these Chinese herbs and like dandelion and black walnut, all these different detoxifiers, and mixed it into this tomato paste. And this dog it smelled awful, but this dog would just gobble this up. And so one of our other dogs had puppies at the time, and we just kind of forgot about him for a while. And all of a sudden it was like, it's been 6 months. He's doing fantastic. So we took him back and had him retested, and he was completely clean of any cancer. And they called him the miracle dog at this veterinary practice. And it was just one of those paradigm shifts that made you go, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of other things out there that we have no clue about.
And you had already been practicing dentistry for a while?
Yeah, I've been practicing probably 15 years at that point. This was like in right around 2000. And so that's when I started looking into the holistic dentistry. I found an old-time holistic dentist that had been practicing many years, and just kind of started going to his practice, learning about what he was doing. I was fortunate enough to still get to study with Hal Huggins, who's one of the kind of the giants in holistic dentistry, and just the more I learned, the more I said, hey, this is the way I've got to do this, and I can't keep putting amalgams and metals and all of these different toxic substances into people's mouths.
Awesome. And at that time, did you start reading Weston A. Price's body of work?
Oh, yeah. Once you get into, originally I got in with the IAOMT, which is the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, and there were a lot of speakers that spoke about him. So yeah, once you start looking at his research, I mean, it's phenomenal, and it's so fascinating to see what he did, and to think that that's not something that they would be talking about in dental school. And he actually was one of the top most decorated researchers in the American Dental Association. And as soon as he started talking about root canals and all this stuff that they didn't want to hear about it, they very quickly blackballed him and tried to discredit him.
Yeah, I like to make this point often because, we can drum up these big conspiracy theories, but at the end of the day, it's usually just about business.
Yeah.
Yeah, take us down the road of your big discovery with the breath and the palate and our sleeping, and how you discovered what you're doing now.
That was kind of an interesting journey, because it started at some conference I was at, and I just ended up talking to this dentist, and he happened to mention how his daughter how he had just fixed her breathing and her sleep. And he said she'd struggled with her weight. She was doing poorly in school. She didn't really have any friends. And as soon as he fixed the sleep and the breathing, he said her life just completely changed. She's, the weight started coming off. She started doing better in school. And I left there just kind of that thought just really stuck in my mind. At that time, I had a younger daughter, and I'm thinking I want to make sure that, she can benefit from that. And I started kind of searching for where can I learn about this. I kind of, in retrospect, wish I would have gotten more information from him, because I started kind of afterwards, till really the wheels started turning and all those thoughts kicked in. So I spent a long time going to a lot of different conferences, and everything and they teach you a whole bunch of stuff about the diagnosis and all the science, but they never taught you, number one, how to implement a program in your practice, and then number two, the fact that it wasn't really a fix. It was really just a Band-Aid. And I kept going, and I didn't realize it at first, because I kept going to seminars, and it was like 4 or 5 years in, I'm going, wait a minute, I'm going to all these conferences, why am I not putting this into practice? And then I started looking into a company called Vivos, because a couple of the holistic dentists here in Phoenix were using that program. And they were having some mixed results, so I ended up studying with Dr. Felix Liao, who wrote that book I mentioned, the 6-Foot Tiger, 3-Foot Cage. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that I really read about epigenetics and how we can actually still create remodeling in our facial structures. And then eventually from there, someone told me, you've got to go see this guy lecture in Houston. I went there, and that's when I learned about Dr. Balfour's Homeo Block and really about quantum physics. It's not Newtonian in nature. It's not forces like orthodontics. It's literally an appliance that signals our bodies to do what it was meant to do. And to me, that just, I was all over that. Like that made the most sense of anything I'd ever heard.
Awesome. So let's back up a little bit, and let's back up a little bit, and let's identify the problem. Let's go over basic tenets of Weston A. Price and what he discovered as a dentist studying indigenous cultures, and then the problems that you're seeing, developmental, breathing problems, especially as we get older. Many people are using CPAPs for sleep apnea. That's the number one prescribed, as you say in the book, for that issue. But you're looking at things at a more holistic perspective and structurally. So break it down from Weston A. Price, what the problem is.
Well, Weston A. Price discovered when he went into these, quote unquote, primitive cultures, how quickly their jaws and facial structures changed as soon as you introduced processed food and processed sugars. And he's the one that really started talking about things like whole milk and breastfeeding, and I think he actually fell, he was on the right track, but now in retrospect I'm actually realizing that when he talked about the nutrition of the mother's milk, as far as development of the structures of our head and neck, the mechanics of breastfeeding are actually more important. And now they've got research and studies showing that it's early functional orthopedics when a child breastfeeds.
And the orthopedics is the movement of the bones or the development of the bones. And so what happens when a child is breastfeeding or doesn't?
Yeah, so the suckling action actually pulls the upper jaw forward. And that's how it creates that space that we need for the airway. And so if you have that very passive process of bottle feeding, not only are you not getting the proper nutrition, but there's really no physical effort that the baby has to exert, so it doesn't trigger all that growth in the maxilla, which is the upper jaw. And so that's really the missing piece of the puzzle, is that in all my training, everybody always talked about the lower jaw. Everybody, if you didn't tolerate a CPAP, you would get an appliance that basically just holds your jaw forward and prevents the tongue and jaw from falling back into the airway. But nobody ever talked about. I don't think most dentists even think it's possible to change the upper jaw. I think if there's 100 dentists sitting here, probably 95 of them would walk right out of the room if I was giving a lecture on airway development, and I said, hey, you can grow the upper jaw. They were like, no, that's done.
So this is very innovative thinking in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's exemplified in James Nestor's book. I mean, it's caught by wildfire, and I've been studying breath work for many years before I saw the podcast with Joe Rogan and James Nestor. And you said that one of your mentors, Ted Balfour, is quoted in the book multiple times, referenced in the book.
I was not happy when I read that book, because I'm going, wait a minute. Here I'm reading this book, and I just learned more about airway and the why than I have in the last 6 or 7 years of going to all these conferences, studying with all these specialists. And here this journalist actually decides to dig into what's going on, and I'm going, wait a minute, this is what it's all about. So I was mad in a good way. I was happy that I discovered it, because I learned, like I said, more from that than I had in the previous 6 or 7 years.
So this is pretty groundbreaking, especially for someone like me. I saw a 30-minute dissertation by you, and I was hooked immediately. And of course, I'm looking for human optimization myself. And so, of course, I came in and saw you. And we are in the process right now. So everybody at home, I'll be reporting on this as we go through it. I've had my first assessment interview with the doctor, and he had some CAT scans on my face. Imaging, and the discoveries were pretty profound. And it also makes sense because in the last couple of years, due to stress and or structural issues, and my holistic dentist actually gave me an appliance that pulled my my bottom jaw forward, and I broke the thing, and there was nightmares coming off of me and all sorts of like really emotional components, history in my jaw. And it was so uncomfortable that I abandoned the ship. And so, so when you started talking about appliances, and then I saw your dissertation on it, I was amazed and very intrigued. And so can you talk a little bit about the imaging that we now have? Because science is always ever evolving. And now we have imaging software and the ability to see the airways. Exactly. And so can you talk a little bit about your discovery on that, and then how you've been treating patients recently and the results?
Yeah, when we suspect that someone could benefit from this program, we kind of put them through this little Airway workup, and it involves what you're talking about. The CT imaging is amazing. We've got this German technology. Because we're not imaging soft tissue like you see. Sometimes people hear like abdominal CT or thoracic CT, and the exposures are off the charts. These are very, very low exposure images, because we're always, obviously, as natural dentists, that's one of the things that we're concerned about, is not exposing our patients to that.
And rightfully so. Just that level of care right there. Anybody that's watching at home that doesn't have a holistic dentist, start your mind going in that direction, because my holistic dentist in Los Angeles for many years, Dr. Raymond Silkman, he's an amazing guy. He has always put the extra care on me. I know that he has numbing materials that are less toxic. They're more expensive. They don't last as long. And so also with the x-rays, he doesn't overexpose me. He doesn't take x-rays that are unnecessary, even though it's a moneymaker for that business. Yeah. And so I think that's, it's powerful, and it speaks volumes about the level of care, like really caring, not just promoting one's business, drilling, filling, and billing. And so, so that's admirable that you've gone down this road, but please continue about the diagnostic tools that you have and the innovation around that.
Yeah, so that they call it cone beam technology is amazing, because it lets us see structures in ways that are, it's unbelievable that you can, go slice by slice in all these directions. And we're able to look at the airway, we're able to look at all the nasal structures, sinuses, the jaw joints.
Really, I had a little bit of deviated septum. Yeah. and actually, when I saw it, it made sense, because my children would say, "Dad, you're snoring." And I'm like, I don't snore. I'm a certified health nut. My sleep hasn't been as restorative in the last few years. And I'm very interested in getting a handle on it. And lo and behold, you're finding breathing issues. And obviously, I need optimal breath and oxygen while I'm sleeping to restore. So it makes sense that I'm waking up not as restored, even though I have good sleep hygiene. I've got some blue blockers. I know to go to bed at a certain hour to get certain amounts of sleep, but I was not restoring. So maybe talk about what you saw in my scans.
Well, like you said, in your scans, we did see a little bit of a constricted airway. We saw some sinuses that had a little bit of there was some clouding in the sinuses and the deviated septum. We also, of course, the others, we do a couple other things. We do that rhinometer that actually measures, and pharyngometer that measures the collapsibility. That was that thing that made those sound waves, that clicking noise. And then we take an optical scan. And then probably one of the things I get the most information from is that home sleep study that we did.
So I wore a device on my finger all night long and hooked it up to the software, the app on the phone. And what did you discover in that?
So the that sleep imaging is actually pretty amazing because, you saw how easy it was to use compared to like if some guy said, okay, you got to go spend 2 nights at a sleep lab. I mean, this is way easier. And I think the data is actually, you sometimes wonder, like, is that data they're getting at a sleep lab really representative of how you normally sleep? When you got a bunch of wires hooked on you and people watching you, I don't think I'm going to sleep like I would at home. So I like the fact that it's very easy to use, and it gives us the quality of the data is on par with a lab sleep study. Now, we don't get as much information as they do, but for the most part, what we're using it for, it's actually the perfect balance of being easy to use and giving us good information. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we're looking for is, of course, apneic events. And
what is that?
Apneic events. So that's really how the medical and dental profession measures the severity of sleep apnea. So it's measured by how many times an hour do you stop breathing for more than 10 seconds, or how often does your blood oxygen desaturate by more than 3 or 4%, depending on which test you're using. So we measure the sleep apnea, but we're also seeing other things like, how stable your sleep is, the REM sleep, whether or not there are, and this is a biggie for especially for women, respiratory disturbances. Women seem to have a hormonal protective mechanism, so they don't do what you generally see with men. Men, you kind of picture the guy, a little, middle age, a little overweight, thick neck, that stops breathing for a minute or two. Women have all these like little events. They start desaturating, and then you see the heart rate just pop up. And we used to just use a simple pulse oximeter, and you just see on women like just little desaturations and little heart rate going up. So they're getting these little micro arousals to basically tell themselves to keep breathing. So
it's a survival mechanism. Yeah?
Exactly.
And it's stress induced. It's fight or flight. Yeah.
That's really the key to that, is that they are preventing, their body's smart enough to say, hey, oxygen is my biggest priority. I've got to keep you breathing. But they never register as being a sleep apnea patient. So if they go have a test done, the doctor says, oh, you're normal. And they come in and do one of my sleep tests, and I go, here, look, you didn't have any apneic events. You were fine, but look at the fragmentation of your sleep. You never got into the REM sleep or the deep sleep like you were supposed to. So they pay a huge health price, especially with the elevated cortisol and that being in fight or flight all night long is not conducive to healing and regenerating.
Yeah, and people have big challenges today. Let's face it, the autoimmune statistics, chronic fatigue are through the roof, fibromyalgia. People are not restoring. And I also noticed in your book, because you talked about the men a little bit more being a little overweight, the fact of the matter is you don't start working with people until they get their BMI underneath 30. Is that right?
Well, we'll start working with them because it's kind of because it's such a vicious cycle. Sometimes if you can't get people out of that fight or flight, they have a really hard time getting the BMI down, because the bad breathing does a whole bunch of things. It affects leptin, your appetite suppressing hormone. They've done studies on food choices people make when they've had poor sleep. So you have poor sleep.
Wake up and raid the refrigerator.
Exactly. You're like, oh, you know what? I feel crummy. Let me just grab that donut. And that adds, that makes the BMI worse, which makes the sleep worse, which makes you make more. So it's all these vicious cycles that people are in.
Elevated cortisol shuts down digestion and stores fat. Exactly. An overweight body is a stress body.
Yeah.
And so you obviously, if you're a holistic clinic, you offer some type of lifestyle changes for people. I know you have a chiropractor in your office as well as multiple other doctors.
Yeah, exactly. The chiropractor has been wonderful, and when I studied with Dr. Balfour, he's the reason why the chiropractor's there, because he kept saying you have to work in conjunction with a body worker to maintain that posture and even to get people breathing properly, because most people are doing this light thoracic breathing, and that's another thing. Now they're just not in fight or flight all night long. Now they're
all day.
All day.
Mouth breather,
Yeah.
neck breather. And so you also use the imaging software, or you took photographs of me next to a grid. So you look at the posture, front and side angles.
Right. So when we take those pictures, it gives us a lot of information about how people are breathing, and because they're usually, you can see their head will be tilted a little bit, or their shoulders. You don't realize how off we are sometimes till you stand in front of one of those grids. But it tells my chiropractor a lot about how you're breathing. And so when I do the consultation and people are about to start treatment, I do offer a free, just a discovery visit with him so they can get to know him, and he can do an evaluation and kind of go, hey, what do you need? When I first brought him in, we just kind of told everybody, okay, you get do 6 of these. But we found that if they actually get to meet him, and he can do an evaluation, he can formulate a much better treatment plan for them.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be going through this process, to say the least. And so let's get a little bit into the process. What is an airway assessment, and what does it include? We discussed a little bit about it, but maybe you could be very specific on what is an airway assessment and what does it include?
So yeah, it includes all of the imaging that we were just talking about. We also just spend a lot of time, I feel like my best tools, especially once you've treated a number of these, are your eyes and your ears. Mm-hmm. Now I just can sit down with someone and they tell me about their lifestyle, about how they sleep. I can look at them, I can look at their facial structures, and I can almost with certainty, like when I'm sitting there talking with someone, I know exactly what their home sleep study is going to look like. But sitting down and also kind of connecting the dots for the patient, because a lot of people, if you say, most dentists would go up and say, hey, you're a sleep apnea patient, people are going to kind of recall, like, no, I'm not. Like, kind of like when you tell someone you snore, right? Like, no, I don't. My wife lies.
Or you need to lose 30 pounds. I can see it right there.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear that.
Now I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
We're just talking about the assessment and what it includes and what you can see with your eyes. You've gotten so good at this. And that makes sense because I just brought on a bunch of new clients that I have in a group class that I have. And there was one gentleman that it was visual, like whatever he's eating or whatever lifestyle that he's doing, there are some things that need to change, and he needs to detox certain things out of his life. And I have to start slowly, not to overwhelm him. But one of the first things that I saw with, dark circles and skin tone, skin texture, is, assisting the liver in its own detoxification process, because you can see a lot of premature aging start stacking up. And so you're able to see this with your eye even before the tools.
Well, yeah, we have them fill out a little sheet about some of their symptoms, and then when you look at their health history, and I think I was going down the road of saying, like, people generally say, no, I'm not a sleep apnea patient, but if you start talking to them about their sleep and breathing, all of a sudden they'll tell you all kinds of issues that they're having. And when you can connect that, for example, if you see their mouth breather and they've got high blood pressure, and you start connecting the dots, like, hey, wait a minute, if you're mouth breathing, you're not producing the nitric oxide, you're not getting that vasodilation. So you're going to get to the point where your meds are going to become less effective. So when you can start connecting the kind of the signs and symptoms, and then say, look, you've also got the things that are potentially a consequence of that, then they're a little bit more interested in saying, yeah, let's check it out and see what's going on.
Yeah, and the older I get, and some of the challenges I've had in the last few years, had a lot of stress last 3 years. But usually, if I don't feel so well going to bed, if I get a good night's sleep, I feel like a spring chicken in the morning. So sleep has tremendous value, and obviously optimizing this is very important, hence why you're on the show. So how does this appliance, so have we defined the appliance? It's like a retainer that you put for the maxilla, for the front. Did you have it in your pocket?
Sorry. Here, actually, let me pull it out, and we can. I've got it in my.
Yeah. So how does this appliance work, and what is it doing? And the camera's right there.
Okay. Yeah, so this appliance is actually a fairly simple appliance. The key to it is really what's called this uniblock. So the uniblock is a little piece of plastic on one side that only allows you to hit on one side of your mouth. And so what that does is it actually replaces, as Dr. Balfour would say, it replaces the hard food in the diet. And that's really the key to development. And the cool thing is these being epigenetic appliances will actually trigger our bodies to remodel. There's actually an expansion screw where you can tell that the appliance is working. But what it does is it literally just triggers the body to express the DNA the way it was meant to if conditions were optimal.
It activates stem cells. Is that correct?
It does. One of the things is the appliance flexes, and there are these little springs that go up against the back of the teeth, and it just puts these light cyclical forces into the teeth. And that's really what our bodies are designed to respond to. It's not designed to respond to the brute force like orthodontics. When you swallow, when you breathe, when you chew, those are all cyclical on-off forces that the body responds to and initiates the growth that we see. And then the other thing that this little block does is the appliance forces you to swallow correctly. So you have to now bring your tongue up an extra maybe quarter inch or so, and that tones all of the muscles at the base of the airway and prevents that airway from collapsing. Because what we're finding out, it's not so much about how large the airway is, it's about how collapsible it is.
Wow, this is some great intelligence. I'm really digging it. So how long do I wear it for each night and the duration of the treatment?
The nice thing is this appliance is you only have to wear this about 8 hours at night. So you literally just pop it in when you go to bed and take it out in the morning. And I went through orthodontics and I hated having anything in my mouth, on my face. Like I'd go to sleep and 10 minutes later I'd wake up and it'd be somewhere in the room, but it wouldn't be in my mouth. And I also have a horrible gag reflex. So I decided to make one of these for myself because okay, I want to see what I'm asking my patients to do. And I put it in my mouth and I bit down. I went, this is actually, in a weird way, it's almost like when you give your body something it needs, intuitively you know. That's the feeling I got because I'm thinking like, how bad is this going to suck? And I go, not only does it suck, like it actually feels really good. Yeah. And so my office manager, Irene, she calls this the snooze button. So when she puts the appliance in, it literally feels like you just start getting groggy and getting ready to go to sleep.
Or one of the other assistants told me it's like having your little blankie, your little binky.
Yeah.
And so, what I liked about this and reading and hearing all the information about it is, again, the differentiation between orthodontics, which is moving the teeth, and orthopedics, which is the development or the movement of the bones. And so, and I'm very excited to get mine as well. And so, the possibility exists even for children or developed adults, instead of restructuring their jaw with orthodontics or even the surgeries where they crack open the bones of the face. You can actually try this, and this might solve all those problems. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's certainly a good, to me, some of those procedures are very valuable and useful. And I always feel like the more I know about and the more tools I have in my toolbox, like the old, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, that's how a lot of, doctors operate. I feel like this would be a good logical first step. This was actually Dr. Balfour, this was invented as an orthodontic appliance. He had that practice on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, had all these performing artists, and he found this old-time orthodontist that used these appliances to straighten teeth. And so when he started using it on these performing artists, that's where he first discovered how the faces were changing, how bone was growing, how jaw lines were changing. And yeah, his artists were coming back saying, yeah, my makeup artist is telling me my face is changing, and I'm hitting higher notes when I'm singing. So that's how he kind of went down that path of discovering what these appliances were capable of doing.
Well, higher notes when you're singing. As an actor, I studied Alexander technique. I went through Rolfing. I'm always looking for ways to, optimize my body as as a performer, as a human, take care of the genetics that I've been given. And I've gone down this whole path of epigenetics. I didn't know it was called epigenetics when I first got into all this health stuff. But because it activates stem cells, it goes back into developing, tonifying your muscles in here. What is it called? Epiglottis or
The genioglossus muscle is the one that supports the
So there's double chins. There's and also the facial collapse. We're looking for beauty. A lot of people are getting lip injections and bone cheek. Jawline extensions and all these things, but we could actually try this and invest in our health with something like this and possibly not only feel better but look better. And that's what most people are after when they're seeking some of these exogenous beauty treatments.
Well, and I think on a primal level, health and beauty are kind of related. Obviously, when you're looking for a mate, you want someone that's healthy,
vital, fertile.
Yeah. So that I think some of the things we look for, we obviously don't maybe consciously go, oh, she looks like she would be good at bearing children. Maybe you do.
She could bear some kids.
But I think those things go hand in hand, and one of my mentors always said, yeah, all my women come back more beautiful and all my men patients come back more handsome when they wear this. And we've, in fact, James Nestor talks about it in his book, that we've actually had women who've read that book and come in and wanted one of these appliances purely for the aesthetics. And I said, well, the side benefit is going to be you're also going to sleep. You're going to sleep better. So
you're going to sleep better. You're going to breathe better.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense. And that's why I was so enamored with James Nestor's interview on Joe Rogan, was because here I'd studied pranayama and breath work and practiced a bunch of it. And there was so much intelligence that he came up with. If people haven't seen that interview or read his book, he, as an experiment, as an investigative journalist, he plugged both his holes of his nose up and was a mouth breather for, I think he lasted 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was 10 days, and they were at Stanford doing all these crazy tests.
He got diabetes, like onset, or the whatever it was, almost before diabetes. Like he got multiple diseases.
Yeah.
And so your breath is so important. It's the first form of nutrition out there. So how do I know if I'm a candidate? Somebody's watching at home. How do I know?
Well, a lot of it are very basic signs and symptoms. For example, something like clenching and grinding at night. They used to say, oh, it's just a bite issue. We'll put a mouth guard in. Well, we now know that when your airway starts to collapse, clenching and grinding is one of the signs that you're trying to keep your airway open.
Survival mechanism.
Yeah. And unfortunately, all those mechanisms over time get less and less effective. That's why, in our 20s and 30s and even 40s, you might be a grinder doing all these things, and all of a sudden you get into your 50s and 60s. Now these things are affecting you on other levels, like
high blood pressure.
Yeah, and you don't have energy, your BMI is going up, and I don't feel like working out. It's just people get into this vicious cycle. And so this can kind of get them kind of break that cycle. Yeah.
Well, the potential is there. And look, guys, viewers at home, girls, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, the more attention that you pay on your health, the more it can reap benefits. And awareness is the first step. And if you start going down any holistic path, holistic health is mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, one may lead to the other. And so...
And there's actually a whole bunch of other, when you start thinking about all the signs and symptoms associated with bad breathing, things like getting up at night to go to the bathroom. People don't realize that when you get into proper deep sleep, your body produces antidiuretic hormone. Now you actually don't produce urine. People are like, well, I just woke up because I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, no, you woke up because you didn't reach the proper level of deep sleep. And so we look for, that seems to be a pretty common thing for people that they've got going on. Neck and back pain. One of the real things, you were one of our like prime examples of how you should look. Remember I showed you the green and red line, your head and shoulders lined up perfectly, but a majority of people that come in
Forward
start
neck.
getting a forward head posture. So all those muscles are under strain and going into spasm, and they have all these back issues. They go to the chiropractor, and they try to move it back. But if you don't fix the airway, my joke is if your body says, I need to be here to breathe, I don't care where your chiropractor says your head has to be. That's where it's going to end up. And so, people come in, they're like, I've been going to the chiropractor for the last 20 years. Go, well, should maybe tell you that maybe we need to change things up a little bit at this point.
Try a Rolf or some yoga. I mean, it makes sense. Like even the study of yoga, it's breath and movement, right? The asanas or the practice of asana yoga. It works with the pranayama. It works with the posture. It stretches and strengthens certain muscles. So, yoga, 5,000 years old, it has application. And so, did we go over how do I know if I'm a candidate? So you listed a bunch of symptomology. Yeah. You want to list a couple more just to reiterate?
Yeah, things like we literally go down the list of things that you were talking about just now, and one of the things that people say a lot is that they didn't realize how little they were dreaming. Which is, so just talking to someone telling me, I get up to go to the bathroom. I go, okay, they're not getting into deep sleep. Oh, and I barely dream. Okay, they're not getting much into REM sleep. So those are indicators as well. And then literally just, that waking up feeling like I got 7 hours of sleep. Why don't I feel like it? That's probably one of the biggest symptoms. And for women, the problem is when they have those little bursts of cortisol we were talking about, when they wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, now they can't go back to sleep till 5 or 6 in the morning till they're literally just exhausted.
And then when we're stressed, we have anxious thoughts. Anxious thoughts can turn into depression, et cetera. So it's this negative feedback loop or this vicious cycle.
And the problem is with anxiety and depression, that is one of the problems if you don't get enough REM sleep, because that's when neurotransmitters are being balanced, memories are being stored. So they're finding more and more connections to all of these neurological and mental issues as well. And just for fun, I Googled what are the top 25 prescriptions written in the United States. And I just wanted to see of all those conditions, which ones could be affected by poor sleep. And it was like 21 out of the 25. Sleep was a contributing factor. So there's obviously, and it's not the only factor, but it's certainly a very foundational problem that nobody's looking at that should be the first thing we're looking at.
Yeah, so let's review a little bit. Breath is the first form of nutrition. Philosophically, let's just say that. And then sleep is essential for restoring the human body. And if you can't breathe properly, you're not going to be sleeping properly. You're not going to be digesting properly. Your hormones are going to be out of balance. It's very important that we sleep when the moon is out and we rise when the sun comes up. Cortisol, adrenaline, testosterone, estrogen, these things all need to be in balance. So holistically, this has huge applications. So, can my children do the program?
So the Homeo Block isn't designed for kids. We have another program that we start kids at a much earlier age on, as early as 4, and they're called habit correctors. So what we're trying to do is already look at how the tongue and the muscles work, so that, like Weston Price showed, if you're eating that firm diet and you're stimulating all those structures, you get them to grow. Well, we're kind of helping kids do that, so we're training our muscles to work properly, and a lot of those kids end up not needing orthodontics. And so we try to get kids in as early as possible so we can kind of address the root cause of the whole reason why they have end up with crowded teeth.
Okay, and the opposite of that, a developed person or someone who's approaching their 60s like me, does it apply to me? Does it apply to the older person that's already set in their ways, or maybe they don't think they have a problem?
No, excuse me. No, these appliances, we have people in their 70s doing these appliances. And Dr. Balfour actually shows a video in his training where he had a 79-year-old woman coming in, and he was kind of a crabby old New York dentist. And he's like, for some ungodly reason, she wanted a nicer smile. So I made her a homeoblock. And he took pictures and he literally showed how the bone grew and how her face changed. And, when the face changes like that, everything moves along with it, and it helped her breathing as well. But we're seeing people in their 70s still being able to benefit from these appliances. Because one of the things you have to remember, we've talked about sympathetic and parasympathetic. Dr. Balfour says we're really treating autonomic nervous system dysfunction. And that, to me, like when he said that, I'm like, yeah, it's right. Like if you're in parasympathetic and your body can do what it was meant to do, it's going to do some amazing things. And when you're in fight or flight, unless you're being chased by something, nothing good's going to happen.
The cortisol and stress is going to break the body down. And when you're restoring, the anabolic phase works miracles.
Yeah.
It absolutely works miracles. And so, will it hurt?
These actually, if you've had braces, the braces are not fun. And the braces actually do hurt because what they're doing is they're moving teeth very quickly and then holding things. Every time they put a new arch wire in, they're putting a lot of force on the teeth, and they basically move the teeth and then they just hold things there. These are just, because we're not moving anything, it's literally your own body's creating all of these changes. So it's literally like you're just chewing on hard food. And everything else your body's doing itself. So we're not putting those physical forces on teeth like we think about when we're talking about orthodontics.
And how long until your patients start to see results?
Well, that's what kind of blew me away, because when I first learned about these, I read about the fact that it could change and remodel the bones of the face. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. But I also thought, well, that means it's going to take a while before people feel better. And so when I started treating patients with these, I was just shocked when 2 weeks later, people would come back for their first follow-up visit after you get the appliance. And they come in and they say, this thing's changed my life. Like, I'm sleeping better. I'm waking up feeling more refreshed. A lot of their symptoms are already going away, and I'm going, wait a minute, it's only been a couple weeks. And that's when I started really digging deeper into what else this did with the toning of the muscles, which obviously is something that would happen in a relatively short time, and the autonomic nervous system, which is something that happens literally almost instantly when you put this in the mouth.
My whole career as a certified health nut and discovery, research, and practice of these holistic methodologies has been to downregulate my nervous system so I can actually be presentable in the world. And so, well, that's great. How much does it cost?
So that was my biggest frustration when I was learning these other programs, because the training was so expensive. The appliances that you had to buy through them were so expensive. And I'm all about it. I come from a family of German engineers, so I'm always trying to be as efficient as possible. And I'm looking at these patients sitting in front of me that are sitting there in fight or flight all the time, and they're suffering all these health consequences. I'm like, I can't tell a patient I'm going to charge them $12,000 to $15,000 for this treatment. So I worked really hard to get it down to about the cost of what, say, Invisalign would be. So it's right around $6,000, depending on the complexity. And then that program lasts for anywhere from 12 to 18 months. And we include everything. So all the follow-up visits, any more imaging, we do follow-up home sleep testing, all that's included. So pretty much, unless your dog chews this up and we have to make you a new one, everything is included in that program.
So guard your mouth guard with your life.
Yes. If it's not in your face, it should be in your case. That's our joke.
I love it. That's great. And the final question is, no, they don't take insurance.
Well,
insurance doesn't usually cover too much holistic stuff, but please.
Well, actually, we're in a really good position as holistic dentists, because on an insurance form, what we do and what the guy down the street does looks basically the same. So if we put down a crown and he puts down a crown, the insurance company is like, okay, will pay it. They don't know that, the protocols that we did to protect people when we're removing the old materials, and how we're the biocompatible materials from Germany that we're using to fabricate the new crown. So all those other details don't get onto the insurance bill. So it's not like with doctors, because what they do, they just look at it and go, yeah, we don't even know what this is. But we do everything that conventional dentists do, only we do it with the proper precautions. And so actually
biocompatible materials, stuff like that.
Yeah. And so what we do is we don't take assignment of benefit, and that means we still, the patients pay for their treatment, and we have a lot of good tools to work it in their budget, and then we submit the insurance form to them. So we submit all of the x-rays, narratives, the forms, so that all gets sent, and then we just say payment to subscriber. So instead of them sending the check to us and us billing the difference, you just pay us and they send you the check. So it comes out the same. It just allows me to be more efficient, because in a practice of our size, we probably need 3 or 4 people just to call insurance companies all day. And so it allows me, my goal is always, how can I deliver the highest level service in the most cost-efficient manner? Because if you have a whole bunch of people running around just filing insurance claims, that gets reflected in the cost of the treatment. So I'm trying to keep the cost of the treatment as low as possible.
Wow, that's fantastic, because traditionally I haven't carried dental insurance because of that little dance, and usually they didn't cover most anything that I had done. So I just didn't bother with it. I've always invested my money in my health. I'm not too good with real estate, or I haven't been good with real estate and precious metal investments and stock investments. But I've been very good at investing in myself.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100% there. But you're right. You have to, I remember early on, I read some book, and there was right in the beginning, there was a little Arabic proverb. It says, when you count all your belongings, you put a 1 for your health and then zeros for all your stuff. And if you don't have that health, what do you have left?
That's right. That's right. Health is wealth. Doctor, where can people find out more information about you?
Well, we've got our main website, just mynaturaldentist.com. And I also have a website dedicated specifically if you're interested in information about the Airway program, and that's abreathofhealth.com. And the nice thing is, on both of those websites, you can download that book that Troy mentioned. We have a PDF on there that you can download, and we have some good specials. I'm always trying to remove the barriers of entry for patients so they can get the care that they're seeking. And we have a brand new facility. We just actually did a major expansion, and so I wanted to be able to be capable of handling the patients when they call us, because there's nothing more frustrating than you learn about this new way of doing things, and then you call up and they tell you it's 6 months to get in as a new patient. So I wanted to be able to have a facility where I have the space to be able to take care of people quickly, and I have a couple of really great young associate doctors that are wonderful, that are trained in all of the things that I've been trained in over the years. So it's kind of nice to mentor them when you have young doctors that are actually willing to learn, and they love this philosophy, and they get it. So
it's a wonderful staff. Everyone's very excited. They're very into health. I met them at a health event, and many of them were interested in what I was doing. And then I came in there. It's a state-of-the-art facility. I'm very interested in business, so I asked you many questions as well. And you also told me that this is a very hot topic. You're taking on about quite a few patients each and every month. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of, seems like the breathing is just really gaining, and they kind of call it the hot topic in dentistry as well. And I think it's driven by the fact that more people are becoming aware of the fact that their breathing and sleep is, at the root cause of a lot of things that they've maybe been battling for years and years.
Yeah, that's great. And you are also Natural Dental Partners on Instagram?
Yes.
Natural Dental Partners on Instagram, yep. TikTok as well?
We're not on TikTok yet.
Okay. So Natural Dental Partners on Instagram. Information will be in the show notes. Doctor, thank you so much. We'll have you back soon because I'm about to get my appliance, and then I'll be updating people on my progress.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.